Hello and welcome everyone to my video on how to get a 5 on the AP Physics 1 test. I managed to do this on the 2019 version of the test, so without further ado, let's get into the video. So the first thing you should really be doing is to differentiate between the two different types of AP tests. There are easy memorization-based tests and difficult practice-based tests. Things like the AP US Government and Politics exam, that's considered pretty easy because if you want to pass the test, you just need to do a bunch of memorization. But Physics 1 is considered one of the hardest AP tests. And the reason for this is that you don't really need to memorize that much, but you do need to do a lot of practice problems, and you really need to understand how physics works if you want to do well on this test. So the first thing that everyone should do is to find some free resources that you can use. So right now I'm going to show you how to download the AP Physics 1 course and exam description. So you could just type in AP Physics 1 CED into the Google search bar. Just wait a second. So College Board does provide these. They're mainly for teacher use, but there are a lot of good uses for them if you are a student and you want to study. So just wait for that to load. You can download this here. I'm not going to do that because I already have this downloaded. So it's a pretty big PDF, so it might take a while to load on your computer. So you can scroll down here, and there are these things called unit guides, I believe. I don't know what they call them, but yeah, unit guides. So you scroll down here, and they have these for every single unit, and there are some pretty good links that you can click here that gives you even more PDFs that you can use to study. And something I found useful is just to read these things and see if you understand them. Like, displacement, velocity, and acceleration are all vector quantities. If you understand what this means, then you're in the clear. But if you don't understand what it means, well, you got to go back to Khan Academy or your textbook, and you need to, or just ask your friend, and you need to understand what that means. And you might want to go through all of these, so that's going to be pretty useful. And another thing that you should really be doing is that you need to do a lot of Khan Academy. I actually did 100% of all the Khan Academy exercises, and I think that was the main reason why I got a 5. So they're really good, and they're really similar to the test. And there are also a lot of YouTube videos, like there are channels like Organic Chemistry Tutor, and those are pretty good too. So for AP Physics 1, there is a lot of math involved, and if you're taking Algebra 2 at the same time that you're taking Physics 1 like I did, there's going to be a lot of math that you don't know, but your physics teacher just expects you to know it. Like finding vector components, trigonometry, unit circle definitions of trig functions, and sinusoidal functions. All those things, they're taught maybe at the end of Algebra 2 or during your pre-calculus course, so if you don't know those, you could just go on Khan Academy and get a basic understanding of them. You don't really need a really deep understanding of these concepts, you just need to know the basics. And also, I do recommend like learning very basic calculus concepts like derivatives and integrals only so you can relate them to linear, exponential, and sinusoidal functions because you need to find relationships between position, velocity, and acceleration. And if you know that acceleration is the derivative of velocity and velocity is the integral of acceleration, it can make the test a lot easier for you when you're analyzing graphs. So a good thing that I did is that I learned both on Khan Academy and I learned when my teacher taught it to me, so you're really going to use a lot of Khan Academy here. And you're going to also have to take plenty of practice tests. College Board does release these for like at least the FRQ section, they have them all online. But the multiple choice section, you're going to have to ask your teacher for that. They might set up like certain practice test dates, and you should go to all of them because the practice tests that they give you are real tests that were actually administered. College Board actually sometimes reuses questions from previous exams, so I have two pictures here. On the left, there's a question from the 2015 exam, and the question was asking you to derive the acceleration of the blocks, and then on the right is the 2019 exam, the exam that I took, and you also have to derive the acceleration of the blocks. So Khan Academy has the answer and the whole solution to the 2015 question, and so I watched that, and so when I was taking the 2019 exam, I could just do that question really, really fast because the answer was the exact same as it was in 2015 because of how similar the problems were, and so I just had a lot more time to work on the other questions. So definitely at least look through all of the FRQs if you don't have time to take all of them because they're very useful. And you gotta target your practice. You can't just keep reviewing the things that you already know because it's a lot easier to do that if you already know how pendulums work. It's a lot easier and just to convince yourself to do a bunch of pendulum problems because you feel like you're accomplishing something and you feel like you're really studying, but you're not if you already know the concept. So Khan Academy is the best way to study for the multiple choice section. And if you don't understand something like electric charge and electric force, you could just go on Khan Academy and they have plenty of videos and exercises there. And a good question that you should ask yourself is, what do I not want to study right now? And if I were to take the exam right now, what's the scariest question that can possibly appear? And then if that question happens to be some sort of question about angular momentum and you really don't understand that topic and it's really intimidating to study because you understand like zero of that topic, you need to study that like right now. Don't waste your time studying something that's really easy. And another thing to keep in mind is that there are two modes of studying. There's active practice and there's passive practice. Passive practice is what a lot of kids tend to do, and they just ignore the active practice. So passive practice is just like watching YouTube videos. It's not very like useful if you want to actually get good at physics, but if you want to just get a basic grasp on some really complex topics that you don't know how to approach, they should be good, but you should really just start with the passive practice and then move to active practice as fast as you can. And active practice, like, that's mostly what's on Khan Academy. And it requires a lot of high level thinking, so it's going to be a lot of work and it's not going to be very comfortable to do, but you gotta just get used to that if you want to be successful in this class and on the AP test. And every time you get a question wrong, and you will be getting a lot of questions wrong. Like, a lot of my friends, they see that I got 100% on Khan Academy, and they think I'm some sort of genius. Like, I just know all the answers immediately. Like, no. I didn't get all the exercises immediately. Sometimes I had to do the same exercise like 5, 6, or 7 times before I got it right. And don't just skip over an error if you get something wrong. Like, don't ignore it at all. Even if it's a simple addition mistake, you need to go over it. And now that you know like how to study, you really need to know like where are you going to get your studying materials from, because it's a practice-based test like I said earlier, so you need a lot of questions to pull, like a large book that you need to pull questions from, or a website, because more questions is just better practice. So the best place for accurate questions is Khan Academy, just because it's free. Your textbook, everyone should also have a textbook if they're taking the class. The textbook has some pretty good questions in it, but like the one I used, like the Pink College Physics book, that had questions from Physics 1 and Physics 2, so you might want to clarify with your teacher, because if your textbook has a bunch of questions on capacitance and you don't know what that is, like, you should really go and ask your teacher so he or she can tell you that, oh, capacitance is for AP Physics 2, you don't need to study that right now, because that can save you a lot of time. And if you do see a Princeton review book or a Barron's book on sale, you can go ahead and get it. Those books are always pretty good. And make sure to ask your teacher for previous exams, like I said earlier, because the questions from those are like the best ever. And yeah. And what to do when you get a question wrong. A lot of kids, I see them, like during class, my teacher assigns Khan Academy, and so what they do is that they do a Khan Academy question, they get it wrong, and they immediately skip to the next question. They don't like look at the hints or look at the answer or anything. They don't even want to see what they got wrong or why they got it wrong. That's terrible. You should not be doing that. So your most productive learning experience will come when you make a mistake. So if you're only getting problems right, you need to move to some harder problems. So every time you get a problem wrong, you need to understand why you went wrong and where you did it wrong. So what I like to do is I like to just take out a notebook and write down why you chose your answer, why it's wrong, and how you can adjust your mindset when you approach a similar problem. Like, something that I use to keep in mind is, if I am approaching a problem and I don't have any idea what to do, it is super unfamiliar to me, I just use conservation of energy, because 90% of the time when I see a super unfamiliar problem with a weird topic, conservation of energy usually just works for me. So you don't need to like reread everything you write down. Just the act of writing it down is going to be really useful for you. And another thing you should do is that you can't slack on your homework. There are kids, I'm not going to name names, but they would just go online and they would find all the answers and they would come back to class and they didn't learn anything from their homework. And because like your teacher knows what's on the AP test, your teacher has probably teaching like for years, and they know what's on the AP test, and they know what to give students. And if you just cheat on your homework, you're not going to get anywhere. So, and you need to attempt all the problems. Don't skip over hard problems. Like my teacher, he would just go by and stamp all the problem. Like, he would just stamp your homework if you had like 2 pages of work done. So a lot of kids, they would kind of make it a game, like, how many problems can I skip before he actually notices that I didn't do all my homework. Like, don't do that. That's just not a good habit to get into. And you need to realize that you should have all the resources you need to solve a problem. Like, you're going to look at problems and you're going to say things like, there's some sort of equation here that I don't know, I'm just going to skip it. But that's almost never the case. You should really just like keep doing the problem. Because sometimes I saw kids, they would get a hard problem, they'd stare at it for 10 seconds, they wouldn't write anything down, they put their pencil down, and they go online and look up the answer. You don't want to do that. So if you're not making progress at all, and you've just spent like 10 minutes really trying to solve the problem, what I like to do, just take a quick break, exercise, like walk around, do a push-up or two, and then meditate for like 30 seconds, deep breathing, and then go back to the problem. And that works 90% of the time for me. And try not to look at the answer immediately. That's just what I said earlier. If you do that, you're not going to really learn anything. A lot of people like to say, oh, I'm learning a lot because I'm looking at all these answers and I know how to do the solutions now. That's just not how people learn. And after every problem, you need to ask yourself, if I were to do this problem in front of the class, what would I say? Like, maybe if tomorrow in class, or today in class, if you're doing your homework right before the class period, if your teacher asks you to come up to the board and solve the problem, how would you explain it? Because there were kids, they would just like put their notebook under the projector and they would just walk away. Like, that was their explanation. It wasn't good. So that's also really useful because on the exam there's going to be an FRQ section and you're really going to need to explain your work really well. And you need a good calculator for the exam. Not a great one, you just need to know how to use your calculator. So, because my teacher did provide calculators for the exam, but a lot of them were broken and a lot of them were lacking a lot of really crucial functions that were needed on the test. So most students are going to have like a Texas Instruments. That's fine. And you can, if you have like a strange calculator that not very many people had, I've just reviewed College Board's policy. And you're actually allowed to program your calculators, but I did that. I spent like hours and hours looking online for the best programs for my calculator, and then comes test day, I didn't use the programs at all. They were pretty useless. So like, you just need to use your calculator quickly. You're not going to be graphing any complex functions, but you just need to know how to use your calculator, because you don't want to spend a ton of time like trying to figure out your calculator when you could be figuring out problems. And the same goes for the formula sheet. You don't need to memorize the entire formula sheet that you get, but you do need to know what's on the formula. Because if I got a question and asked about the frequency at which a spring oscillates, I don't know the formula of that off the top of my head, but I do know that that's somewhere on the equation sheet. So I can just flip back really quick, read the equation, then flip back to the question, and then I can actually do the problem. It's pretty useless to memorize the whole equation sheet, but you do need to know like what everything here represents. Like, I do need to know that this equation is the force of gravity between two objects. I do need to know that this equation is the force between two charged particles. I do need to know that these are kinematic equations. I need to know how to use them, but memorizing them is pretty useless because you have a formula sheet. And one of the things that kids struggle on is that the test is pretty much all conceptual, because you're not actually going to use your calculator too much. I know I just said you need to get used to your calculator, but you're only going to be using it a couple of times. Most of the test is going to be spent just staring at problems and trying to figure them out inside your head. Like, if block A has this mass and it's traveling in this velocity and it has in this direction, and block B collides with it at this mass and going in this direction, what are the blocks going to do? Like, which direction will they travel if they stick together? Like, you just kind of have to run that simulation in your head. Like, it might give you like just this top line right here. It's going to say what's going to happen when these two waves come together and they interfere with each other, and then you need to draw these 4 or 5 panels down here. And so you need to know what's going to happen when they collide, and you need to have like a really clear mental picture of what's actually going to happen when they collide, move together, and then move apart. So that's a big part of the test. And even now that you've done all of your studying, like right before the test, I don't suggest studying the day before the exam, just because you're not really going to learn anything. You're going to be way too stressed out, and you really should just get a bunch of rest before the exam. Like, if you can get like 5 hours of sleep before a history test that you need to memorize stuff for, and just like write down everything you memorized. But physics, you need a lot of sleep if you want to do well on the exam. I do suggest getting like a little bit of exercise right before the exam, just really light exercise, just walk around, like, because a lot of people just say, oh, just don't be nervous before the exam, but that's not possible. Everyone is going to be nervous before the exam, but you can cut down on that. Like, just walking around can do a lot. Meditating for a few seconds can do a lot. And if you've taken full-length practice tests and you're familiar with the tests and the timing for the test, you should do a lot better on the test. And don't make huge habit adjustments. Like, if you don't drink coffee in the mornings ever, don't decide to drink 2 coffees right before the test. You're not going to do any better. Like, you are just going to be super jittery during the test, and just do what you always do. If you never eat breakfast, don't feel like you need to eat breakfast. And if you always eat breakfast, you should keep eating breakfast. Just do what's familiar to you and do what's worked before, because everyone is different. You just can't tell everyone to always eat breakfast, because some people work better when they eat breakfast, some people work better when they don't eat breakfast. There's a lot of everyone is a little bit different, so there is going to be a break during the test, and what you do during this break is actually going to be really useful, because I was really nervous during the first part of the test. I don't think I did all that well on the multiple choice section, but then I took some time, I went around outside, and I just walked around, and I came back in the classroom, and I started meditating, and I was just super relaxed for the second portion of the exam, and I did really well. So don't think about the multiple choice question section during the break. Like, a lot of kids, they would go around and talk to their friends, and the first question would be, how do you think you did on the section? Because what you want to do is you want to take your mind off of the multiple choice section. You don't want your brain working on that in the background while you're working on the FRQs. So set that aside, pretend it didn't even exist. So some people like to talk with their friends if that's soothing for them. I kind of get anxious around when I talk to people, so I like to just stay alone. Meditating, of course, and if eating snacks worked for you, then eat, but if you never eat snacks during tests, then just don't bring snacks. Just don't make adjustments to your daily habits, and I mean, you should be fine. So, guess that was the whole video. Thanks for watching, and wish you good luck on your AP tests. If you do have a piece of advice that I didn't mention in this video, then I recommend commenting down below and then sharing that with other people, because that's always useful. Thank you.